In today's world of hyper-competitiveness, more gaming options than ever before, and vices like TikTok and YouTube Shorts dominating any spare time we have, there is a gaming genre that seems to have had a mostly steady growth and has established a respectable place in the gaming landscape and a footnote in history that will always be remembered, showing no signs of leaving anytime soon. I am, of course, referring to the genre of the roguelike. Starting back in 1980, no one was to believe that a simple game made by three men would sow a seed that would grow roots felt around the world. Hi, I'm StevieBlu. Welcome back to another video that literally no one is going to watch. Today, if you would be so kind as to spend your time here with me, we'll be looking at the who, what, where, why, when and how of the roguelike genre, its subgenres, and what makes the genre great. With Goliath's successes like Binding of Isaac, Hades, and most recently Balatro, there is no better time to understand the magic behind one of gaming's amazing genres. If you stick around to the end, I'll be highlighting some of the hidden gems that I highly recommend and I think deserve more appreciation. If you find yourself failing in your quest to watch through the entire video, don't worry, you can try again next time. Only this time it'll be just a little bit easier. So let's cast our mind back to 1980, where the world learnt what Neon was and Blockbuster and MTV were about to define the youth culture of the world. Imagine that. Gaming was definitely in its infancy and three men would band together to develop a game. Michael Toy? Yes, his surname was Toy, he's my actual hero, sorry dad. Glenn Witchman? Wait, Witchman? What the fuck, this is so epic. Hopefully the third dude doesn't let us down. Ken Arnold. Literally the most AI generated name. Anyway, sorry, back to the immersion. These three heroes developed a dungeon crawling game called Rogue. And while I'd love to delve into the lives of these three madmen, it isn't really relevant to this video's focus, but what I can tell you is they're probably all great men who've done tons of charity and help out their local communities. For any of you current or soon to be savants out there, this is the root of the genre name roguelike, because the games in it are like Rogue. The more you know. There are both roguelike games and a subsidiary genre that runs tandem, referred to as Rogue-Lite games. The main difference between the two being that with RogueLikes, it enforces pure permadeath where each run is completely fresh. There is absolutely nothing that carries over from the previous attempt except for the player's own improvement. Rogue-Lites will, however, include some or many different methods in which the player character will progress as well, carrying something from the previous runs. Often this is an overarching XP total which results in different upgrades which will make it likely that you'll complete the game if you keep plugging away. If not, progress further as a bare minimum. But we'll get onto the latter later in the video. Let's focus on roguelikes for now. From the original Rogue game to the present day, there are hundreds of games from indie all the way to AAA, so we've got a lot to get stuck into. Roguelike games are characterised by having a gameplay loop of attempting a run of the game of sorts, which is intentionally designed to be too difficult to be completed on the first try, and death will result in a full restart of the game. This isn't, however, to be confused with games that are just difficult. These games are, at least started off, as dungeon crawling games where you start at the top, or floor 1 of somewhere, trying to descend to defeat some sort of greater evil and trigger the completion of the game. Another defining feature of the genre is procedural generation. Simply put, this means that certain elements are generated at random in order to add a certain challenge and diversity to the game. While primitive around the time of Rogue's release, this feature has grown to become unfathomable with its power and ability to add variety to a game and endless possibilities and opportunities to players. The most popular example of this, to demonstrate what I mean, is Minecraft. Each time you start a new world and it generates, this is the game using procedural generation to build the map around the parameters that it's given. So this includes, but isn't limited to, enemy location, resource spawns, terrain, and different biomes. Hopefully you can grasp the scope of how powerful this feature is, and how once taken and ran with, can open up a whole bunch of new paths for gaming to explore. Just as a little side note, the amount of different Minecraft worlds that are possible for generation exceeds 18 quintillion. A number I'd be proud of reaching even on Cookie Clicker. A number so huge that I had to actually Google what it was. 18 000 000 000 000 000 000. That's 18 zeros after the 18. So I was thinking for my next project, I will be speedrunning every possible Minecraft seed, so definitely subscribe if that sounds like something you're interested in. The final ingredient, which makes something a roguelike, is the use of permadeath. This just means that when you die, there are no checkpoints, you start the game from scratch. Dungeon crawling, procedural generation, and permadeath are definitely elements seen throughout more of gaming than roguelikes. It's when they're fused together in a single game that the magic truly happens. By no means was this next game the first game to popularise the roguelike genre, but it was, however, my first introduction to any roguelike elements, and that was the original Diablo. While the surface level gameplay was more of an RPG hack and slash, this was my first experience with the savagery of not only permadeath, but of different maps generating different layouts. While the framework was the same every time, I knew I was descending into hell through multiple different maps. I didn't know how it would be laid out, I didn't know anything more than there's going to be enemies there. This allowed little nappy wearing me to spam my left mouse button for hours on end because, although simple to modern standards, this was revolutionary to me and many others. This was before the internet was a given like it is in today's world, so it was like magic. Seriously. However, as brutal as the original Diablo was, it still had something that stopped it being a roguelike. Saves. Well, more importantly, loads. While death was permanent in the sense that you didn't respawn, you could just reload your game. So this does remove what makes the roguelike great. But that's enough about me, let's talk about you. The video. Yeah, sure thing. Rain check then. The intention of these games is to proactively learn the ins and outs of certain mechanics of a game in order to know how to use them to defeat any and everything that is thrown against you. The way they aid the player in this is to have the early game be extremely simple, with most games in the genre having little to no barrier for entry. Then, slowly as the player progresses, they increase the difficulty curve and introduce new mechanics that add depth and detail to the game, creating sometimes an unfathomable scope for exploration, both with character builds or physically through the world. The drawback of this is it can be hard for people to pick up and play a lot of these games after time away due to not being able to remember what half of the mechanics are. This is something I find and have found myself wiping save files or simply not returning to some games that I loved, simply because the relearning seemed daunting for me. Most times I'd choose not to even bother. For the record, this is something you'll find all across gaming, and the ability to pick up and go is something I found myself valuing as I have less and less free time in life. A great way to think of roguelikes is less of a type of game and more of a layer that can be added to a game. Less of a musical band and more of as an extremely diverse instrument used within the band. It is a set of ingredients that can be either inserted into or built around to create some of the most ingenious and compelling dynamics that have ever been made, in my opinion. Especially in recent years, and the same thing that happened with music, the ability and reach of indie developers to create meta-breaking game concepts has never been more possible, and we're seeing somewhat of a boom in that regard. A great example of this is the 2024 smash hit Balatro, which grossed $1 million in 8 hours and was made by one single madman. Not bad for a day's work. Going by the name Local Thunk, he has birthed a game that many thought they didn't want, but have found that they needed. In principle, the game is poker. However, with a generous injection of roguelike sauce, it has become a behemoth. Seemingly endless possibilities and the ability of your luck to change for better or worse, it in essence leans into what makes the global titan poker so popular. Constant choices, modifiers and a healthy amount of RNG make for a completely unique experience. Once again, we'll touch on this a bit more later. So like anything, and like I alluded to earlier, any successful genre of anything, there will be subgenres. And with that said, I present my personal favourite offspring of the roguelike genre, the Rogue-Lite. Seemingly identical in its components, but with one crucial concept added, there is something that will remain with you through defeat. The most common example of this is primary character XP that improve your character or weaken enemies. There is a somewhat grey area here, and while I mention it, the difference between the like and light elements of these games are heavily debated, but I define them the way I have in this video, obviously. The other commonly voiced opinion is that the defining feature that separates the two is in the combat. If a game features the aforementioned qualities and is turn-based, it's a roguelike, and if it's not, it's a roguelite. To each their own. I just thought this might be something to keep in the back of your mind throughout this video, and you can make your mind up what sounds more logical to you. The game Binding of Isaac is interesting in its own way with regards to which it falls under. The way it works is, you don't carry anything over on death, but you do add potential modifiers, drops and items that have the potential to appear in future runs. So with no guarantee of whether they will show up, does this make them like or light? I'm more than sure you guys will let me know, but if you haven't played this game, I highly recommend it as the gameplay is very simple, but gradually becomes bullet hell-esque at certain times and can get very interesting with certain builds you end up with being nothing like what you would imagine. Seriously, some of these get absolutely insane. One of the main perks to the roguelike genre is its open canvas for diverse and captivating concepts. The range of games that bud this genre is anything from your simple CCG games, we'll get onto those very soon, rhythm roguelikes, all the way to your RTS games. This allows the masses to find something to cling to and be introduced as a byproduct of other elements of the games that drew them in initially, much like myself with Diablo 1 earlier. What we see, especially in more recent times, is a tendency to make roguelites with games like Risk of Rain, Rogue Legacy, Faster Than Light and Don't Starve paving the way and proving that this genre is to stay. It's not just a fad. My first introduction, and boy oh boy what an introduction it is by the way, to the roguelite genre was Darkest Dungeon. A brutal and punishing game about taking a team of presumably desperate adventurers through a bunch of dungeons in pursuit of treasure, which all sounds amazing. Only problem is, these guys have a tendency to go insane faster than a sub-teacher in high school. Most actions in the game cause your madness bar to raise, and when filled, they have the chance of doing a whole cocktail of bad things, like refusing to listen, Charizard style, stealing your treasures, pirate style, or attacking your own teammates, Kieran Dyer, Lee Bowyer style. I've got to admit, those references were both terrible, and one of the three was extremely niche. I'll let you guess which one. This game took permadeath and ran with it, making it a formality and forcing you to manipulate the consequences into something salvageable. This game's great. I definitely recommend playing it if you haven't, as I'm sure you can get it cheap these days, as there is a sequel out, which I've not played, as I'm too much of a poopy pants scaredy boy. A recurring theme that you'll find in these games, when done well, is that yes, they have a non-existent barrier for entry, yet the ceiling of potential that these games have is extremely high. No game epitomises this better than Slay the Spire. A card collecting game, of which there are plenty now, none surpassing this in quality nor popularity, starts the game off extremely basic, but believe me when I tell you this, it can get wild. Just look up the crazy combos on this game, or the speed runs, and have your mind blown. It really encapsulates what I love about games, and more specifically roguelites. You run through the game as a character, unlocking more if you are successful, and must make constant decisions which alter your experience dramatically. Whether it's what you'll encounter next, what card you want in your deck, or whether or not to stop off and rest, you will be forced to be constantly planning for the future and have every possible outcome in the back of your mind. It's rare to get two of the same feeling experiences with this game, and that is what ties this whole family of games together. To really show you how much this genre has come on, it's best we take a look at 2022's titan, Hades. Having been named and winning Game of the Year by several different ceremonies, Hades holds the accolade as being the first video game to win a Hugo Award, an annual literary award for the best science fiction or fantasy work. This game was everywhere you looked on content platforms like YouTube and Twitch, and also had a large and dedicated speedrunning community. Hades really solidified the genre to more of a casual audience and showed that roguelites can hold their own against the growing tedium that is yearly FIFA and COD releases. Hades had a heavy emphasis on skill to be completed, something of which I struggled with and actually never completed the game, but boy was it beautiful. AAA graphics, visual style and sound design second to none. This game had it all. It was the complete package, and it was recognised as such. So, we've spoken about some examples of the genre pushing boundaries and cementing themselves forever in not only roguelikes' mark on history, but also gaming. It's time to look at a game that has had the complete opposite of a AAA development cycle, and by all means, has no right in doing as well as it has. Balatro. We spoke about it earlier briefly, but what does this game do so right that others can't or haven't done? While this game is all the rage right now, it is by no means a flash in the pan. It's managed to take a card game that dates back as early as the 1810s and deliver it in a way that is unlike anything seen before. In Balatro, you play traditional poker, but with plenty of twists threaded throughout. Jesus, try saying that 10 times. Twist threaded throughout. Twist threaded... No, I'm good. Constant modifiers and game-altering mechanics make there a lot more to worry about than simply if you should fold on your pair of jacks or if you held your giggle in when you saw a pair of aces. This game takes everything that makes roguelikes popular. It's simple to get started, even with a hand display helping those that don't know how to play poker. Possibility of an unfathomable amount of combos and outcomes which make replayability something that no one need worry about. The scope and mechanics of the game grow from considering not only your hand, but also your deck. The various modifier cards outside your deck and the cards you're not playing can affect your multiplier in the game. It grows from playing poker to playing almost entirely a metagame unique to Balatro. It's definitely one of the most addictive games right now. Ask anyone that's playing it and they'll agree. It also has a heavy sense of collectability about it too, with tons to collect, which adds a completionist element to a deceptively vast and varied game. Balatro seemingly doesn't miss, and I'm sure will go on to inspire countless devs in the fact that it was built by one person alone. That for me is what makes roguelikes so amazing. Compared to other genres like your shooters, RPG or MMOs, the entry to creating a commercially successful game more often than not comes tied to a hefty price tag, which immediately alienates the majority of game developers that aren't part of a AAA machine willing and able to drop millions of pounds to make something so amazingly polished that they see a return. With roguelikes, you can apply the ingredients that it does best and voila, you have a successful game and often franchise on your hand. No better example of this? The original Risk of Rain. The first entry had style, sure, but looked 20 years removed from the titles being released around it. But it simply didn't matter. It knew what it was, and it did it superbly and went on to spawn a sequel, and the rest is history. You can find plenty of, for lack of a better term, and I mean this nicely, shit-looking roguelikes out there, but they can get away with it because it's not about the graphics that makes the games good, and I love this. The diversity on display when you look at this genre is crazy, and it's only getting wider. You really do get the sense that you're always just around the corner from another era-defining game like those mentioned previous. Balatro is the latest, but it most certainly will not be the last. Before we wrap this video up, I just want to give a few big ups to some games that I've played over the years and I think deserve more time in the spotlight. So here we are, in no particular order. Hero Siege. A fantastic, more traditional feeling roguelite, this game leans heavily into RPG elements at its core, with tons of different enemy types, armor sets, and a great online co-op and community that seemingly still goes strong to this day. Arcanium, a card collecting game that has you advance through an overworld using a 3-lane, semi-traditional card game battle system as your combat. You find yourself deciding over different routes to take to overcome the evil in your runs. I was lucky enough to be sponsored by these guys during their early gameplay testing, and I had a blast playing it, and continued to play it for many months after. Next up is Monster Train, another card collecting game. Found this one on Xbox Game Pass and liked it immediately. Similar to Slay the Spire in a lot of ways, however I found it to be brutally difficult after a few run completions, as you unlock scaling difficulties up to 20 different difficulties. However, saying this, don't let that put you off, it's still very good and easy to get into. You've seen a lot of footage of it already through this video, but Against the Storm, an excellent city builder roguelite which sees you battling the elements in a quest to please the Queen, while not having her impatience grow to catastrophic levels. As soon as I heard city builder with roguelike elements, I was in, by the way. A simple concept, but with a ton of depth, and with the persistent choices and elements of randomness, this game becomes a hidden gem and one that I've sunk hundreds of hours into. Curse of the Dead Gods, a game that tops Hades in some people's eyes, maybe not in terms of consistent quality, but by gameplay. I found myself enjoying the hell out of this game, diving and dodging through the very interesting maps that this game has to offer, and the choices it throws at you make for an exhilarating time. Definitely pick this one up for yourself, as the light mechanic alone is something that makes this one stand out. Are there any games I missed out? I'm sure there are, so feel free to recommend me some ridiculously rad roguelikes, requiring ranting and raving regarding relevant requisition. Boom! First try, bazing! Although it didn't make sense, but it was very fun to say, and isn't that the point of words? So anyway, there you have it. What's your favourite roguelike or roguelite? Do you agree on my definition? Do you really care? Thanks for spending your time with me. This is something I'm very passionate about, and hopefully that came across here. If it didn't, don't tell me, because it really will hurt my feelings, and that isn't nice to do to people. Thanks. Until next time.